Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, where we are talking about harnessing AI for smarter records management. I am Amy. I will be your host today. I have been with Elantis for over 8 years now. Elantis specializes in Microsoft consulting services, and here at Elantis, your success is our priority. So we're excited to share some tips about how you can be successful in records management using AI and trainable classifiers. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items to mention. So first off, this session is being recorded, so you will get a copy of it afterwards. Feel free to share that out with your friends and colleagues and use it for future reference. We do have a few polls that you'll see popping up throughout the session today, so we would love to get your input, understand a little bit more about where you're at with your organization, and we'd just love to keep this a little bit interactive. And on the note of being interactive, we have set aside a little bit of time for questions and answers at the end. So at any time throughout the webinar, if you have a question that pops up, feel free to put that in the chat. There's also Q&A functionality. You'll see that at the top of the Teams menu there. You can put your questions in there as well, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the session. So today, as I mentioned, we're talking about trainable classifiers. So we're going to start off talking a little bit about some of the obstacles and challenges that come up when organizations are trying to be effective in their records management. We'll get a nice overview of trainable classifiers. We're going to have a live demo of how you can get started using these AI features. And we'll talk a little bit about some maybe potential pitfalls or considerations that you need to know before you get started. Joining me today to share some of this information is Mark Davidson. Mark has over 12 years of experience in Microsoft consulting and the IT industry, so he's really got a lot of expertise to share regarding SharePoint, Purview, the entire M365 platform. So thanks for joining us, Mark. To get us started, let's talk about some of those challenges that you've seen with your clients when trying to implement records management.
Yeah, for sure. So when we look at things like classical records management, when you things without automation, no formal tools in place, there's a lot to be desired, like relying on users to accurately categorize records or tagging documents one at a time. It's unrealistic. Data entry shouldn't be a primary focus or a core responsibility. When you have challenges like training users and having consistent outcomes or managing information across multiple locations or even like non-digital locations, other challenges like inconsistent categorization and filing or lost or duplicated records, what comes out of all those things is number one, a massive compliance risks. You'll have difficulty locating files, and for public entities, these sorts of things make responding to freedom of information requests very difficult, time-consuming, and potentially inaccurate.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really big challenges. And we hear this from organizations that we work with, like records management, it really can't be left up to the end user. As you said, it ends up being inconsistent. It's difficult to train. But when you think about the volume of data that's created, I mean, there's an average now of 2 billion documents created daily, which of course is just an absolutely overwhelming amount of files for organizations to manage. The volume of data just keeps increasing and increasing. So it's very challenging for an organization to manage this effectively. And ultimately, that's why today we're talking about how you can use AI and automation to do this for you. But thinking about these challenges, some of the things we've seen with our clients as well is because this is such a daunting task, they might just decide to keep everything. We've heard this from clients that, they still have records from years and years and years ago, maybe 25, 30 years ago. All of this information still exists within their environment because they're afraid of maybe getting rid of something that's still needed or that they're still legally required to keep. So, Mark, maybe you can chat a little bit about whether that approach is effective for organizations.
It's just not. Keeping everything forever, like everything forever, is not a good approach. It may seem like it, like, okay, we have everything, but it actually creates a lot of risks, particularly in the context of freedom of information, legal compliance, and at kind of the core of this presentation, productivity. Simply, the more data you store, the harder it becomes to find relevant information quickly. We talked in a previous webinar about like storage costs increasing and things of that nature, but keeping everything means more exposure during legal discovery. Like if an organization is subpoenaed, all retained records may be subject to review, even if they're outdated or irrelevant. Not to mention the massive costs associated with that discovery internally.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really critical risks. And you mentioned the previous webinar. I think we have a link to that in the chat for our audience if you didn't catch that one. But even you mentioned the risk of exposure. Of course, the more information that an organization keeps, the more that is at potential risk of a security or a data breach, which can be extremely costly from both a financial perspective and also reputational. So like you said, really, it's not an appropriate approach. It's not a good approach long term to just keep everything. So organizations really do need to address the records management challenges that they're facing. So, which of course brings us to the next logical question. Let's talk a little bit about how we can go about addressing these challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So staying competitive today means automating tasks, including records management. Like the growing need for automation in the workplace, and especially the removal of repetitive tasks like tagging documents, can free up employees for high value work rather than mundane, time consuming processes like tagging documents one at a time. So Microsoft Purview has a couple features, starting with like auto labeling. We can find the right documents and put the label on it, whether it's a sensitivity label or a retention label. As well as some other automation that's available is automatic disposition or retention. So when a document reaches its end of life, you can either have it set for review or just send it straight to deletion with no intervention required.
Perfect. Yeah. So these are some of the things that we've touched on in past webinars. So again, for our audience, if you want a little refresher on that, you can check out those sessions. But today we are focused on kind of a smaller part of records management, which is the AI capabilities of trainable classifiers. So to kind of lay the groundwork for this, can you just give us a quick recap of tagging files with labels and how that works?
For sure. Yeah, so tags, they're a type of metadata or property that you attach to a file, and it controls how it can be accessed or used. They answer questions like, should anyone see this file? And how long should we keep it? So you would tag a file with a label, and that controls how it can be accessed and how long you keep it for.
Okay, perfect. So then taking this a step further, then what are trainable classifiers?
So Microsoft Purview has a handful of ways to apply classification to content, like these labels and the tags that we just talked about. You can do it manually, which we don't want to do. That's going to take forever. You can use automated pattern matching, and then you can use classifiers. So I'll break these down a little bit. Automated pattern matching is like, does it contain a SIN number? Or does it contain a driver's license number? It'll have, the same dash in the same place with numbers and letters in the same locations. Or you could use something called document fingerprinting, where it doesn't necessarily look at the text, but it looks at the structure of the document. So every time you send out an invoice, for example, it's going to have the same logo in the top left-hand corner. It's going to have the same address in the same spot and things like that. So that's another way. And then there's trainable classifiers, which is what we're really going to get into today.
Great.
So,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Mark. I'm
no
jumping ahead of
worries.
you. Tell us more about them.
Yeah, so a trainable classifier is a tool uh, that can be used to identify and organize unstructured data. So data that doesn't necessarily match text all the time, or it doesn't always have the same structure like all of your outgoing invoices would. It's basically using machine learning slash AI to use a pile of really good matches and a pile of things that are absolutely not the thing you're looking for. And you kind of push both those piles into it, and it can find the documents that match for you.
Cool. That sounds great. So give us some examples of use cases where this would be effective for organizations.
For sure. So if you had, excuse me, like legal documents, things with attorney-client privilege, or statements of work, strategic business documents that are not always going to be the same structure, like a merger and acquisition or deals, intellectual property like patents or design docs. Um, Incoming invoices is a big one because every company kind of builds an invoice different, but they're all sort of the same. Um, Other things like financial information for quarterly or annual results would all be things that would be great for trainable classifiers.
Cool. So of course, these types of documents that you mentioned, these are across all organizations have loads and loads of these types of files. So it just shows, how useful trainable classifiers can really be for us. So if organizations want to get started, do they have to start from scratch and build these from the ground up?
Not necessarily. There's two types of classifiers. There's the pre-trained one. So Microsoft is going to give you just a big pile of things that you can just use and start right out of the box with Purview, or you can make your own, like build your own custom ones. If you need to use something that Microsoft doesn't provide, or they don't quite cover what you need to, and you want to have a custom version of it, so you got the both ends of it. But
Perfect.
we
And I
can,
think, oh, go ahead, Mark. You ready for your
yeah,
demo?
yeah, I'm going to show you guys.
Awesome. So while you're queuing that up, if you want to take over the screen share, the things that we're going to showcase in this demo, we're going to see these trainable classifiers in action. Mark's going to show how you can create one, how you can optimize and manage them, and then how you can use them to automatically apply labels. So go ahead. I see you got your screen share ready. Take it away.
Perfect. So just in the information protection module under classifiers, you can take a look at the trainable classifiers, which is what I've got pulled up right now. And it's going to just be a big long list of things that could be a trainable classifier, like a business plan or an actuary report. And take a note of the created by. So most of these ones in here are just going to be right out of the box supplied by Microsoft. I'm going to have to keep scrolling a little bit. And then if you've got kind of your own, like the one we have in training right now for this demo, um, those will appear, but just by whoever created it. In our case, it's going to be the Atlantis Innovation. But so we were talking about invoices earlier. Let me find invoices in alphabetical order. So this one is a built-in, ready-to-use one by Microsoft, and it's kind of always working, always classifying things. This doesn't necessarily mean that tags get applied right away, but it does find the content kind of right out of the box. So I'm just going to jump over to the Data Explorer to kind of find these things. This probably save this for another webinar, like how to use the Data Explorer and stuff, but just to show you that we've got a few things in one of our demo sites that have trainable classifiers already attached to them with invoice. And a lot of them are named invoice, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are, which is what the trainable classifier and the good pile and the bad pile is for. So that's kind of the content that it's found so far. And we set this up a couple weeks ago with some demo content. But let's dive into creating our own. So, trainable classifiers. So I'm just going to use the one I started just because it's a little bit of typing. And one of the great things about Purview is that the new menu to create something, whether it be a tag or a label or a trainable classifier, and the edit menu, it's always the same. Everywhere that I've seen, you might lose some options like renaming it, but the rest of the things all the same, the edit menu and the new menu. So in this case, the one we set up didn't do very well. It only had 63% inaccuracy. So let's try again. So like I was saying, the new and edit menu are the same, but we can't change the name and we can't change the description. But really simply put, I know I mentioned it before, but you just need to find between 50 and 100 files in one site or many sites that are good content, positive sample content. Altogether, no negative content in there because it could mess up the AI. And you would just add your sites, SharePoint sites in this case. And then once you've added the sites, you can change the folders if you want. If there's multiple folders across the site or one specific folder that all, in this case, the invoices are in. And then you got to provide it some bad content. So in this case, we've got a folder called not invoices, using kind of the same interface as selecting the positive content. You know, choose your site, and then from that site, you can choose the folder. In this case, we've got a folder called not invoices, very aptly named. And then right at the end of the new or edit menu, it's just going to give you a quick overview of what you just did. And then you would just hit update. We didn't really change anything. So it's just going to re-kick off the training. It'll probably come back with the same result of 60%, but in this case, we're just going to wait for the model to finish training. But yeah, after we do that, and it does do its training, it'll find them. And this is why I've got the Data Explorer pulled up, because all of these ones are in that same site, the MISA Copilot demo, and in the same library as well. So if we wanted to look at one of these things that was classified as an invoice, just in the Data Explorer, we can just click on it, and it's going to bring up a little preview on the right-hand side. See if we can. Fortunately, we can't zoom out, but this definitely looks like an invoice to me. I'm just going to scroll away over to see if this is. Oh, yeah, it's got an amount due. It's got some line items. It's got some other information. So it looks like, in this case, it found an invoice, which is exactly what we wanted it to do. But this is using the out of the box classifier. So once it finds them, again, nothing's classified. There's no retention label. There's no sensitivity label. Those who can access it and how long do we keep it for items. We can set up auto labeling policies, and this is where we can kind of take that AI, once it finds the content, and just automatically action on it. So in this case, we've set up a demo invoice auto apply policy. First, you'll have to have a label created. In this case, I created a label called finance team only sensitivity label. And the label will have its own policies applied to it, what it means for retention, what it means for sensitivity, who can access it, what kind of sharing settings are allowed on it, things like that. But not going to dive into making a label today, more so on the auto labeling stuff once we found those things. So let's take a look at this auto labeling policy. And again, the edit menu is going to be exactly the same as the new menu, with some things like the name you can't change after the fact. I didn't put it in the description last time, but I suppose I can add one this time. Give it a name. Then you're going to choose what label you want, and these will be from your pre-created sensitivity labels, just because we're auto-applying a sensitivity label. You can also auto-apply retention labels, but demo-wise, we're just going to do one. We'll leave that the same. Admin units we'll dive into. That'll be another session. It's kind of a bigger topic. For the auto labeling, though, you got to choose where you want to apply the label. Is it going to be all SharePoint sites? Is it just going to be in your emails, or are we going to review OneDrive accounts to auto apply these? For demo purposes, we're just going to put it on all SharePoint sites. You can also exclude sites or just include specific ones. In this case, we're just going to do all sites. Okay. So now that you've got your location selected, you got to create some rules, like what happens. So in this case, we've got a rule that we created. And what this means, and I know it's a lot busier of a screen than we're kind of used to in today's demo, but if the content contains the trainable classifier called invoice, that's what it will apply to. You can also add exceptions, like same kind of thing, except if a document is created by, or it has a property, or if its file extension is, a certain thing, but still just happened to be created as an invoice. And auto labeling, the other thing, it doesn't necessarily need to be trainable classifiers. You can also use other properties to auto apply. But in our case, we're just going to go against the trainable classifier that we just showed. All right, so let's just save that. And then we're going to go next. Right off the hop, it's always going to start your auto labeling policies in simulation mode. What this means is when I create this, it's not just going to go out and start applying things, because that could be dangerous. So it'll start in simulation mode, and you can kind of give it 7 days and then automatically turn it on, or you can leave the policy off. But typically what we recommend is to run the policy, come back, check the results, and then action on things, whether you turn the policy on or not. Again, we got that review page, just like it's pretty common in Purview. Go ahead and save that policy. Haven't changed anything, so shouldn't take too long. All right, just going to switch tabs. So this is the policy that we had, and it's still in the simulation mode. Restart it, edit the policy, just going right into it. The reason I'm switching tabs too, in case anybody's curious, is because Purview is very slow to go from screen to screen while it loads up data. So it's a little bit faster and saves everybody a little time if I just have them all preloaded to where the links click to. So it looked at, in simulation mode, 998 sites, because we were only looking at SharePoint, and it found 48 matching files. Let's take a review of those files. Okay, so it looks like a lot of those invoices that probably in the same location, because that was where we put them. Take a little review. That looks like an invoice. That looks like maybe an invoice. Let's see. You can also review the content. City of New Orleans. Looks like we got a total at the bottom. I know it's probably small for everybody. A bunch of line items, things like that. Let's make that 200%. 125. Yeah, it's a little better. So that's pretty much it. So you can review the content, and then when you're ready to go, you can just go ahead and turn on the policy. If you want to change the content or change the trainable classifier, maybe train it a little more, which we can do. I'm going to show that training. I know I might have skipped that one, but actually training the classifier after it's set up is important. How much time we got? We're on the short stack. Amy, before I go into classifier training, is there anything else we want to cover? Because I know we're close to the end here.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think it'd be important just to chat a little bit about some of the common pitfalls or maybe key
Mm,
considerations that people might want to know before they get started.
yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna stop sharing because that's not gonna be helpful for pitfalls. Um, some of the biggest mistakes to kind of avoid when you're setting up these tradable classifiers is if you send bad data in, you're going to get bad data out. That's with any process, even way before AI. Bad data in, bad data out. Um, if you just assume everything's working and you don't actually validate the performance and do those checks and check the data explorer like we were doing earlier to see like, are we getting the right matches? Um, if you ignore data governance or access controls and um, just kind of work outside the process rather than going like step by step, making sure everything's there and everyone who should see it sees it. Um, and then one of the biggest one, and this is always the hardest one, is user adoption and awareness, making sure everybody knows what's going on so your IT help desk doesn't get just drowned in tickets of why can't I access this or why did my thing get deleted.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for sharing those. So, I mean, what you showed in the demo is, how you can set up a classifier and then use that information, that classification, to then potentially apply a sensitivity or a retention label. But organizations, in our audience, they might be at different points in their journey. Some are just coming into Microsoft
Mm.
365. Others are quite mature. So, are there any kind of considerations that you would also mention before you get started?
Yeah, like regardless of where you are in your journey, a big thing is making sure that you have clear rules. Like you want to make sure you know where you're going, what you should be covering for your data governance policies before you start building anything. Otherwise, you're going to have to rework. It's going to classify things. You're going to have to unclassify them, and it gets very difficult when you're talking about locking down documents to unlock them. Um, got to think about the content lifestyle management as part of your data governance policies. And again, this is a really big one, user training and adoption. Everyone should know what is happening, or it's going to cause like the lack of adoption and lack of awareness is just going to drown IT in tickets. I can't access my files, my things are getting deleted, things like that.
Good stuff. Yeah, thank you for sharing those considerations. So, just a reminder for our audience as we're kind of coming to the end of our webinar, if you have any questions, we would love to see those in the Q&A in the chat. We've just got a few minutes left to address a few of those. While I'll give you a moment to do that, just wanted to point out, we've specifically focused on trainable classifiers, but this is just one small part of the records management journey. So if you're wondering about where to go next with your entire records management strategy, or if you have other questions specific to trainable classifiers, we're here to support you. As a special offer for our webinar attendees, you can receive 20% off of a records management assessment. We'll conduct a series of workshops with you to understand your goals and your challenges, and then create clear next steps for you to further mature and refine your records management processes. So it's a great
Mm.
option for organizations who are looking where to go next. So we do have a couple questions in the chat here. So this one says, if we have static policies in place for records management, i.e. labels applied via document libraries, and trainable classifiers label some of the documents with a different retention, would the longest retention win out or would they conflict? What happens in this
Uh,
scenario?
when when you set up labels, they're going to have a priority attached to them. So different priorities will win out, and you set what's more important when you set up those labels.
Great question. And
That's a good
then
question.
the one of the other questions that I think we have in the Q&A is what happens if a classifier classifies something incorrectly. So how would you change this? Do you have to do it manually? What happens if it's wrong?
So when you go through the training process, which we kind of ran out of time for demo, you'll just go into the trainable classifier and it's going to list out everything that it found. And it's so easy to do. There's going to be a this is right button and there's going to be a this is wrong button. You just click it. Click the this is wrong button, click the this is right button, and doing that like once a month to go in, just do a quick review. Not only does it help with the continuous training, but it does also help filter out false positives.
Cool. And I have a follow-up question for that. So when you're, you mentioned you had things where you can click, yes, it's correct. No, it's not. So are things in there just waiting in limbo for you to confirm manually that it's a match, or what happens to the content in there?
So things will be a match and they'll be able to be picked up by the auto labeling right away as soon as they're found. You don't have to go in and approve every document. Everything is automatically approved until you say it isn't a document, which part of that review process and training your trainable classifiers.
Yeah, and I have one more quick one. We saw you had that little accuracy gauge in your demo. So how accurate, how much can we trust these, or how often do we have to go back in and confirm whether things are a match and check on them?
When first starting out, it's really important to go in there and review everything, like from your first 50 to 500 positive and 50 to 500 negative matches. You want to make sure that the accuracy is up there before it sets out. And then once you set it out and say, okay, this is working, it's past the training mode, make sure it's picking up the right things and go in there and do kind of a full round of training. After that, probably only need to look at it like once a month to get rid of those false positives and then confirm the real positives so it can get better at its job.
Great. Yeah, thanks for those answers. I mean, that's the beauty of AI is that it continues to learn and get smarter, so your results will get more and more accurate. So fantastic. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you, Mark, for your presentation, your demo, and answering these questions. For our audience as well, thank you for joining us. Please follow Elantis on social media if you want to stay tuned for upcoming events. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day.